quorum. Frank Thorwald.
Stephen Cooper. Bill Fire-Robin.
Dale Nations.
We have a quorum. Any conflicts of interest to declare? None heard. We'll move on to item 2, report of the Oil and Gas Administrator.
Okay, first of all, I'd have kind of an announcement. This is going to be unusual, but today at noon, ADQ has some big celebration, which they do approximately every month. A lot of people come down here and gather in 3175. Some of us may still be here in an executive session, and it's what I'm told is it gets fairly loud, but I cannot do anything about it. We're just stuck with it. The door will be closed, so hopefully there'll be minimal noise. But you can expect, if you hear a lot of commotion, that it's planned for. It happens once a month. Usually we're not going to collide with it, but today we are. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the sample repository. Niall Nemeth and I have spent a considerable amount of time in the basement. We had a meeting, you may recall, a year ago, and we're talking about space problems, what to do about it, so on and so forth. And the more I looked at things, the more I realized that what we really had was a problem of efficient use of space. And so I just have a couple of slides here I want to go over with you. I'd ask Niall to join us. I'm not sure where he's at right now because he has some observations and statements to make also. But the before and after picture here illustrates what it looked like and what you guys probably remember from when we were in the meeting a year ago on the top slide. The bottom slide shows after Niall and 2 ADQ employees and myself did a lot of hefty moving and disassembling of shelves from the basement storage area just adjacent to this room. We brought in 5 other shelves into this room and moved stuff around, discarded some stuff, moved those filing cabinets to a different place, put things in boxes, and basically the short story of this is that we now have a lot more space for storage of samples in the future, and I think it will last well beyond my career as the Oil and Gas Administrator, and well into the career of the next person, whoever that is, way down the road. So this is kind of a before and after what it looks like now. You might recall this really strange wooden cabinet that was an end cap on one of the ends of the shelving here. Back behind it is the metal shelving with the oil and gas drilling samples. A little inset here was just to look around the corner from this thing. And over here on the side, there was a lot of stacking randomly of a lot of drawers that contain empty sample vials and some with samples in it that I don't know for sure what they are. And then this shelf here. What we did is we replaced this with shelving here on the end, which adds more capacity. And in the background there's another shelf we added. We're looking around the corner here from this corner. So there's a series of 3 shots here that are side by side, looking down that final aisle. You can see the stack of the drawers and stuff. And this is as it existed before we started messing around with it. The samples, as they started to run out of space, they just started finding places to stick stuff. On the left is the oil and gas sample collection, not all of it, but much of it, filled all the way down to the end, and then they started coming back, going across the top. The most recent stuff is in those white boxes at the top, in the foreground of the far left picture. The middle shot just shows, the middle shot and then the shot on the right just shows after we've done some moving of filing cabinets and so on and so forth, putting up some new shelving. We've added a lot more room. The filing cabinets are in a nice, easily accessible place, but they're out of the way for those other shelves. What's interesting though is that the research that Niall spent time that he spent down there, he discovered some interesting anomalies about referrals to oil wells and water wells, and there were a lot of file cards, kind of like an old-fashioned card catalog file that you used to find in libraries, that document every sample we think that is in the basement. And as it turns out, much to my shock, the stuff that you see here in the drawers on this side, and then there's another row of drawers down this aisle here where the filing cabinets are in the background. Almost all this stuff that's in these fancy drawers was at one time stored, I think at the University of Arizona, and they're water well samples. There was an individual that was employed, I think, by the University of Arizona and then U.S. Geological Survey, maybe the Arizona Geological Survey, who went around collecting samples from water wells that were being drilled, domestic water wells being drilled throughout the state. He collected samples, provided little logs or documentation about depths, and all those were collected in little files and put in all these drawers over a period of years. And we learned all that because the man's name is Jim Posedley, and he had left his business card and a photocopy of a lot of his work in one of the files that Niall uncovered. So Niall gave him a ring. He came down to see us last Thursday, because we were down there Thursday and Friday rearranging all this stuff. And he gave us a little more rundown of the history of what he'd been doing for some 20-odd years. And so the bottom line is that, with a few exceptions, some of these drawers do have oil and gas samples, but with a few exceptions, almost all this stuff are water well stuff. Not directly responsibility of the Oil and Gas Commission.
Dennis, you mean actually vials of water instead of cuttings?
No, cuttings. I said water well samples, I'm thinking of cuttings.
I know.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying, that's exactly right, the cuttings. The actual oil and gas cutting samples that we're interested in maintaining and responsible for start right here, where the drawers in and these boxes begin. That's the bulk of it. Plus the other slide that I showed you was looking down the far left. There's a couple of rows of cabinets here that are completely empty with drawers. It's possible for future room in the future if we need to. But the other thing that Niall's been doing is he has been working on a sample policy and some instructions or guidance to operators for how to submit samples. It's spelled out in the rule. It'll be spelled out in the future revision to the rule also. Our plan is to try to send out requests for all the operators to send their samples in now and send them to Tucson. ADQ has arranged for a DEQ employee whose name is Mark Pilgrim to receive samples, and we're going to give him a little training on how to file them, where to put them. Just checked a few things to make sure that the bare minimum requirements are there, and then just put them on the shelf. I'd be responsible for anything else in regards to inventory. Looking at samples if I wanted to. You won't be expected to do that. But Mark, I have a lot of high praise for Mark Pilgrim. He showed a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of interest in what we're doing, and he pitched in and helped Niall and I moving these shelves and cabinets and stuff around last week. So I think he's committed to helping us out and keeping us on the straight and narrow in terms of the sample storage going forward in the future. So this kind of is the conclusion to the long story about what are we going to do with these samples and do we have room. From a DEQ standpoint, the rent is pretty cheap, and we can continue to pay that cheap rent, and we still got a lot of space left. So I think that pretty much covers it. I was hoping that Niall would be here because he may have wanted to add a few more things. But because of Niall's initiative, largely we know what we know today, and we have it reorganized the way we have it now. So my hat's off to him, but he's not here to get the accolades.
Dale, have you been able to hear okay?
Yeah, I'm hearing it, and I'm looking at the pictures.
Great.
Dennis?
Dennis?
Couple of questions.
I have a question too. The water sample, the samples from the water wells. Can we talk to the the water department to see if they would want those samples.
We kicked that around. I'd have to reach out to somebody in the Department of Water Resources and see
The
what
deputy
they're interested in.
The deputy director we met that one day would
Oh,
be the person to
She'd
talk
be the
to.
one to talk to. Okay.
Any questions for Dennis?
Yeah, I just,
Go ahead. I'll go ahead. This
go
is Dale.
ahead.
My question is about those water well cuttings. Does anybody ever look at those? I know the function of oil well cuttings, but I don't understand why they're keeping such refined collections of water well samples. That's just sand and gravel, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of it at various depths. And if Niall was here, he could answer that question better. I just know that there was a guy, like I said, named Jim Posedley, a state employee, and for a while, I guess, a federal employee, that was directed to do this. This was all done mostly before the development of the Department of Water Resources in 1987. I don't know that anybody in DWR is completely aware that those samples are stored down there, and I don't know if they have an interest in the fact. The reason they're stored down there, the only thing I can say is that it may have been a courtesy of Arizona Geological Survey to offer the space for those samples to be stored. They were transferred when the AZGS was created, moved into that building that they used to be in, and they had occupancy for the whole building, I guess, including the basement. They offered to take those samples and put them down in the basement there. They were transported from somewhere else at the University of Arizona campus. I don't remember if it was the Department of Agriculture or where it was, but they've been dragged around, lugged around, held on to for decades.
Yeah, I would suggest you go, as you've already said, go to the Department of Water Resources and see if there's any reason to keep them.
Okay.
Dale, Frank, the only if any of those samples are from anything but out in the middle of nowhere, there is potential use for them for geothermal. Any contractors that are doing geothermal ground loop systems for heating and cooling could use that type of information to know, depending on what's there, what is at different depths.
Yeah, I'll withdraw my comments about their usefulness then.
They use that regularly. In fact, they'll drill a hole to do that and then put pressure on it, a variety of different things to test that. And I only mention that because that's one of the things that we are required to deal with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then I agree. We need to maintain them until Water Resources would take them over.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I was just, it sounds to me like DEQ, in at least in Tucson, is put on a quite cooperative face for working with you and everything down there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It won't require much of Mark Pilgrim's time. The only thing that is still kind of hanging out there is if somebody wants to come and look at those samples, and this is I guess I should talk a little bit about my ideas for the sample policy and its revisions. I'm not asking for a vote, although I would be interested in some feedback. I don't know how long somebody might want to be viewing samples. Do we want to allow parts of samples to be split out and taken for testing? I mean, that's the customary thing to do, but because of the limited amount of samples that are there to begin with, the rule says you only have to give us 3 ounces per 10 feet, which ain't much. And after a while, there's not going to be any sample left. So do we want to allow that? The thing I'm really interested in, and Niall did some research on this as well, I'm interested in knowing what kind of incentives we can put on operators to, first of all, submit the samples, and second of all, to do the labeling properly to help out the administrator who's in Phoenix and not going to be able to check and make sure these things are written up right. I don't know that I want to expect Mark to put that data on the the ends of each of these boxes. I think the operator should do it. The rule directs the operator what kind of labeling to put on these boxes. If they fail to submit samples, or they don't submit them as they're supposed to, one operator recently had offered to give me his samples, and they were all in little white sample bags. I guess the bags were labeled, but they weren't in the envelopes, and they weren't in a box. They were just all helter-skelter. Why I want them in envelopes, and I want them arranged in a box so they can just be put on the shelf for future use. So I'm wondering what kind of incentives should we use on operators so that they will do what they're supposed to do. If there's a reason they can't submit the samples, such as the hole was completely mudded up and they couldn't get samples, that's one thing. But saying they lost them or they didn't collect them in the first place, or they just want to be ornery and not submit them, whatever. I have thought about, should we have some restriction on how many permits they can apply for in the future, maybe only one at a time, or they can't apply for any permits, so they submit their samples as they're expected. Should we keep part or all of
Dennis,
the
just a
bond?
second. One more. Go ahead.
My suggestion is we table that for a next meeting with a discussion and a vote.
Okay, I'm not sure it'll be ready at the next meeting.
But we table that one and move it because you're asking for input from the board, including a vote.
No, I wasn't going to ask for a vote today, absolutely not.
Okay.
The sample policy's not even drafted yet.
Okay.
Yeah, the concern is the report is not an action item in the open meeting laws, and I represent a number of communities that have had problems with that issue where basically they report and they go into it, and you don't want the Attorney General's office sending you a letter. It's not fun.
No.
Been there.
Sorry, this is Bill. If you'd like, I know Utah's got a fairly extensive thing. I can give them a call and just ask what their policy are on these points.
That would be helpful, sure.
Just to see what another state's
For
doing.
Niall's research, it doesn't sound like states, as a general rule, have much of a punitive measure, if we call it that, for people that don't submit samples, mostly because they seem to have adequate staffing to address the inadequacies of whatever's submitted, and I guess a lot of operators really want to submit stuff.
Well, Dennis, this is Dale. Isn't there a rule that requires that the samples be dried and put in the little envelopes and put in boxes?
Yep, there is, and I want to know. I want to ask the commission in the future whether we should have some consequences imposed on operators that don't follow the rule.
Dennis,
Dennis,
I would suggest we push this to another meeting because we're getting a little beyond now,
Right.
and we have a couple hours and a long schedule here. So,
Okay,
that is my suggestion.
Dennis,
enough on that, then.
Dennis, my suggestion would be just to put some suggestions together with Niles and then submit it at our next meeting if you get it completed by then.
Okay. So let's move on to the AOGCC website changes.
Just a quick note on this. I authorized Dennis to make a couple changes without everybody being present because we were getting some, the system was set up previously to automatically generate information through Google, and what it was generating was political types of things versus oil and gas types of things, and inappropriate types of things. So I asked Dennis to remove that automatic piece and stick something else up there, and to start working on some changes for us.
This is what it used to look like. This is just a screenshot of what it used to look like, and there was some bizarre stuff that was popping up there. But I took the opportunity to also make some changes. So there were changes made over here on the right. This right column is gone, and then I made some changes over here on the left as well. So this is what it looks like at present. Is that big enough that everybody can see? Okay, I don't expect you to read every word there. It's just not going to go up anymore. this time then to start building a guide for operators list, including a link to the rules over here on the right column, the checklist I have for permit applicants, a checklist for plugging abandonment, a checklist for well completion. That checklist, it says coming soon, but I just haven't submitted to the webmaster yet for inclusion. I've been sending these checklists out individually to operators whenever I have any kind of dialogue with them and they're asking questions about it. Over here on the right, this language came from another part of this stuff up here. I got rid of the old stuff, which was at the top, said something about oil and gas programs transferred to ADQ and so on and so forth. It has contact information for me right there at the start, email link, and so on and so forth. Basic requirements for drilling, completing, producing oil and gas, blah, blah, blah. That comes from another part of the web page that was buried down at the bottom, and so I moved it to the top. And then there's other miscellaneous changes across the tops of these tabs, which I don't think I need to get into in much detail. This is just a heads up of things I've been doing with the website. Are there any questions for that?
I tried to follow the link the other day to ADUQ for the most recent notifications. There wasn't anything in there. I couldn't figure out where to find it on the ADUQ site. Or maybe you hadn't posted it yet.
Hadn't posted it yet.
Okay.
It's there now.
All right.
Well, yeah, there we go. See, this is today's meeting right here. You click that link.
Right.
And, I don't know, they have a funny way of doing stuff. I have problems from time to time. I thought they were resolved, but I did check it earlier this week and yeah, it was blank. But that they don't show past meetings. I thought they were showing past meetings.
Could you go back one slide? Could you please go back one slide?
Go back one slide.
Go back to the ADQ website.
Yeah. I'm just, the ADQ is holding, maybe it should be hosting. That's what just caught my eye.
Yeah, did mine too.
And then the agenda is downloadable from this brown link.
Dennis, the sentence above, ADQ is holding this public meeting.
Go ahead.
May I suggest that we reword that a bit? Because again, this is an Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, not ADEQ. Now, it isn't an ADEQ building, I understand that. What would it take to reword that?
Not much.
Okay, then maybe we should put that as maybe something to do next week sometime.
Again, we're not ADEQ, and we don't want it to. We've just taken great lengths, gone to great lengths to
separate
make sure
it.
that was divided, and we don't want to reconnect it again.
Okay. Anything else?
Thank you, Commissioner Cooper.
Thank you. Commissioners, is there any other comments or thoughts before we move on? Dennis, hearing none, move on to the next item, which is the discussion.
Well, discussion of permission policy regarding operator requests for permit extensions and amended forms for review. I haven't spent a lot of time on this in the past 6 weeks. My time's been directed elsewhere. The commission policy regarding operator requests for permit extensions and forms. I think the best form, and it's always been the purpose of the sundry notice for that, is to use a sundry notice and request an extension. And it's not a written policy, but this is what I would propose that it be, is that, as we've talked about before, is that I'd be granted administrative powers for the first permit extension, but all successive ones after a year have to be granted by the commission. The operator has to come before the commission and request that, but I don't have any submittal for you folks to review. This is more or less a progress report.
Dennis, this is my suggestion is that again, we put that on for next because we're going to ask for a vote from the board. So may suggest in our next meeting in 6 weeks, describe it so that the commission can review it, discuss it, and vote on what they believe is appropriate. after you provide forms and
Do you
open
think that
discussion.
this should be written up as it wouldn't be like a substantive policy, it would just be like a little
You
formal
still,
policy,
you
or-
still, we can discuss that, but you're still asking for input from the board and a vote, and that's where I think we ought to move it off to the next one.
Yeah, the difference is you're explaining something and informing us and updating us. The other one is just simply you're asking us for our comments and our vote.
Okay, well, status of regulatory review of our rules by AZOGCC. I attended the inspectors annual forum in Oklahoma City in early May, and I spoke to Jerry Baker. I actually had not ever met him before, so I introduced myself, and he said, I guess that we should expect. He didn't give me a time frame, but I think I've told you folks before that it's probably a 6-month process, and we will probably have to wait for a few months while the committee assembles itself and starts reviewing those rules. I indicated to him that ADQ had seemed to warm up to the idea that paying dues every year on the basis of the associate membership rather than full membership would be something that Balaji, my boss at DQ, who has control of purse strings, would be willing to do, but I haven't been able to reach Balaji and sit down with him and talk about that more formally. I just want to inform the commission that I'm working on that, because it seems to me, quite bluntly, I'm a little embarrassed to go to AZOGCC and ask for such a detailed review from a lot of experts when they're not getting paid any kind of dues. The dues are voluntary, that's true, but I mean, it's like a good faith effort, if nothing else, that
Dennis,
they're still part.
could I clear up something? Question: We have submitted to the AZOGCC our request for their review. Is that correct?
Yes, we did. It was in March, I think.
And we expect them to start when?
He didn't give me a date, but
Okay.
I mean, I'm going to follow up with him this summer. It's an all voluntary thing. The first time I talked to him about it, he indicated it could be 6 to 9 months, hopefully not any worse than that.
Okay, thank you.
One last comment. Before we meaning the commission, or the administrator approaches ADQ to pay any dues, I would suggest having that issue before the board for discussion and approval, please.
Okay. In regards to the annual inspectors forum that I attended, it's a one-day forum that's held on Sundays once a year just before their annual business meeting. It's just a lot of inspectors from all over the United States with their respective oil and gas commissions get together. The thing that I'm always struck by is there are similarities with their experiences like I have, but they all are funded and staffed with more than one person. I think the people I meet are, you might say, specialized inspectors. That's all they do is inspect, and then they write inspection reports and so on and so forth. They don't get into any other aspects of administering the program.
Dennis, what was your learnings comparing what they're doing to what we're doing here?
There is no standardized process for some things that are required by the different oil and gas programs. We had a lengthy discussion about mechanical integrity testing, and there is no common thread as to what the states across the board require. I guess the one thing that I would say is they all look to what might be standard industry practice, which is what I think we should do too. But as to how long the test should last, what kind of pressures, what to do if it can't hold pressure, it's all over the map.
Which will all come out in that final report that they're going to do for us.
I would expect that we'll hear more about that from the AZOGCCs.
And we would suspect that we would get that sometime back by maybe the end of the year or the first of the year when they're
Well, let's
finished.
hope so, but no, they didn't make a commitment one way or the other.
Okay. Any questions for Dennis on this? Okay, moving on to the geothermal rules. I asked Dennis to put this on the agenda simply because I know that so there's going to be some ground loop systems that are in the process of being getting ready to be developed here in Arizona in the Phoenix area, and I wanted to make sure that what we've previously done in years past, 8 years ago, haven't gotten lost, and that we have whatever learnings and relationships we established are still in place, because at the time we did that, Dale, I remember we had the survey involved, DEQ involved, and the water department, and all of us had some portion of that we had to jurisdiction over that. So that's the reason I asked Dennis to put this on the agenda, to find out where we are on that.
I think that's a good idea because, the previous considerations of geothermal energy were high temperatures, something that's hot enough to generate steam, and so that's very different than what Frank's talking about with these ground loop systems. And so I think we definitely need to review our rules.
Dennis, did you find any rules on that, or where we are?
I haven't had a chance to research that in the past 6 weeks.
Any other questions before I ask Dennis if he would table that and put it on our next agenda so he has time to further research it? Any suggestions for Dennis with regard to that research and what we need for the next time?
Other than direct him to speak with Dr. Nations and the chair.
Okay. And to coordinate with the water department and DEQ and the survey. Thank you, sir. I appreciate Commissioner Cooper's input there. Arizona Energy Partners.
So I just wanted to summarize their well activity. There have been developments that occurred right around just after the last meeting that we had. That well, they haven't finished drilling it. Their depth at present is approximately 2,700 feet, which is about half the total depth that they want to be at. Arizona Energy Partners wants to go deeper, but the rig that he had out there isn't hefty enough, isn't strong enough to be able to drill to that depth. So he's bringing in another rig. I've had dialogue with Mr. LeBlanc, and also more recently he hired a consultant by the name of Jamie Hogue, who is present at our meeting today, to interact with the commission to get what Mr. LeBlanc needs to get temporary abandonment status approved, whatever other things that he needs that have been spelled out in a couple of letters to him in the last several weeks. Jamie and I had a pretty fruitful discussion, just telephone conversation earlier this week in regards to what needs to be done. So I'm pretty optimistic that we can get done on the issues that are outstanding with Arizona Energy Partners going forward. So I sent out a letter that gave them the extensions they need for their other permits, and pretty much that's where we stand with that. I don't know why the Inspectors Forum is on here twice on the agenda. I don't know how that happened, but anyway, that concludes my report.
What about Sunbelt Holdings?
Yeah, that's a separate item, and the commission may want to discuss this. I don't know if there's a vote necessary. But late Wednesday afternoon, Kevin Hebert, the consultant for Sunbelt Holdings on the plug and abandonment for those two wells out there near Luke Air Force Base, submitted his final plugging report, which included a supplementary report that had photographs of the activities out there, more details about how much cement they use and so on and so forth. I looked at the pictures, and the first thing I saw was that in my letter, I had specifically directed Sunbelt to put all the information that's required by rule on that cover plate that they're going to bury 10 feet down below the surface. And from the photograph that he submitted, it didn't look like that's what happened. The second thing I noticed, and I wasn't there, and pictures can be a little deceiving, they did use the dye to overlay the top of that plate. The purpose of the dye is so that if anybody in the future, even 100 years from now, goes digging around there, I mean, 10 feet is pretty deep to go, but if they run into this strange colored dye, they're automatically going to want to stop and investigate. They did put dye down there, but I can't tell from the photograph whether it was thick enough. But, you know, what's done is done. The well site has been covered up and plugged with the amount of cement that they said they would, and they used the bridge plug like they said they would. The surface is marked with a temporary marker, and they had a photograph of that. The surface marker is the one that has all the details that's required by the rule, which is the location information, legal description, name of the well, the lease name, the number, and so on and so forth. But it's not inscribed on the metal plate that's buried 10 feet down. All that's on the metal plate is 1-19. So it may be a nitpicky thing. I did have some email communication back and forth with Kevin Hebert and stressed to him the need to get it right the next time on the 1-24. I said I would discuss it with the commission, but that I doubted that he was going to be expected to dig it up and do it all over again, and I don't recommend that, but I thought the commission should be aware because of all the blood, sweat, and tears we put into this thing, and then still didn't get marked quite
Dennis,
right.
question. Now, I'm confused. You say the surface information is at the surface, but it's not on that plate, that plate at the 10 feet down.
That's correct. The plate 10 feet down is permanent.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
the thing at the surface is temporary until they start some kind of industrial development out there, and then they would remove it. That we agreed with that proposal when they made that to us earlier this year. And it was
is that still a 4-foot pipe sticking up or what?
Yeah, I think it is. But again, it's something that could be easily removed.
Yeah.
There's a little fence around the pipe, and it's multicolored to call attention to it. But if they ever start construction out there with Sunbelt Holdings sell this to some other developer or whatever they're going to do, that'll get removed. So there will be no trace on the surface of it. But again, if somebody digs down there someday, they'll run into that plate, but they won't know what it is without that additional information. So the other well, hopefully they'll get it right.
Yeah, now where's the GPS location information? Is that in a permanent location somewhere?
Well, that should be in the report that he submitted to me. It came in pretty late Wednesday afternoon, and I really glossed over that very fast. I was looking for some other things. I know that they GPSed it. The report says that they did.
Okay, that's good.
This information is not recorded with the county recorder's office with a legal description of the property, is it?
Not to my knowledge.
Maybe at some point in a future meeting when we have a situation like this, maybe we ought to discuss the possibility of thinking about creating a rule where it would be recorded that way. It would be in the public record, and so they would have knowledge that there is an abandoned well out there.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah, it's very good. That's a very good idea.
Would it be something that should be a policy going forward that we could even retroactively require Sunbelt to record it with the county?
I think that's something we'd have to discuss as an agenda item in action on the board.
Put that
Would the board be open to?
just put it on a future agenda for that.
Yes, please.
Any other questions for Dennis on Sunbelt Holding or comments? Then moving on to a report by the chairman. We've had a lot of activity the last few weeks on some various issues, as you all are aware, and we will discuss that further if we go into executive session. But let me put it this way, it's all been resolved, and everything is moving forward in a positive way from that. I think the other issues, of course, was the website. We had to make some changes, and I for future, I would like everybody to keep looking at it and make any recommendations they have on what changes we need to make to Dennis so that we can have a more dynamic website and more effective in passing information on to our stakeholders. Any comments or discussion on that?
I have a question. Dale, item 9 on the agenda. Are you saying we don't need to do that?
No, I'm not. We'll do item 9. I was just being more general here.
Okay.
We have to do that one definitely. Any other discussion? Okay. Moving on to call to the public. Does anybody here would like to say something or address the commission? Please identify yourself.
This is James Ballard, citizen. I had some comments prepared to address some of the new rulemaking process, but I now hear that's a fairly long, drawn-out time schedule. So I just had some comments on items that are more common in other states, flexibility on well spacing, larger amounts of bonding and surety. But I'll hold back on this now, since I guess I'll have several opportunities as these rules are discussed in the future.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Not questions, but comments by the public.
I have a question for Joe Dixon.
This is not.
You can't. This
Can't
is
ask
called
questions
public.
here.
This is called the public.
Maybe answer your question directly. Mr. Bonanno talked about the number 4 state well. You don't want to talk about that?
No, we can talk.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Moving on, legislation affecting the Arizona Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. Dennis, do you know of any?
Well, again, the first item we've already covered, the UIC primacy. I got a short email from Jerry Smith, who's spearheaded the effort with ADQ to get primacy. The legislation, the statute, I guess, is in place, and DEQ is going to be working with stakeholders first to understand, as he says, customers' values and principles, address feasibility issues before they make a draft rule. Then they will go through and make a formal draft rule, and again invite stakeholders back to be a part of that process. And he's formally invited the Oil and Gas Commission to participate in both of those stakeholder outreach efforts. So the first stakeholder outreach is going to be talking about the kind of concepts and what will be put into a UIC rule that fits with Arizona's requirements. And
Whose requirements are these?
Actually, can we take a bigger step back?
Yes.
Dennis, can you explain to me, to the public, what is a UIC? Where the jurisdiction currently sits for? What is the effect of primacy, and how will it affect the Oil and Gas Commission? So we kind of bring it into more of a relevant discussion.
Thank you.
so UIC stands for Underground Injection Control, and it is currently a federal regulation here in Arizona. Region 9 EPA, headquartered out of San Francisco, issues permits for anybody that wants to inject pollutants, liquids into the earth. They have 6 categories. I'm not that conversant on the UIC rule to say what those 6 categories are, but basically category 1 is for disposal of liquids from I think other wells that are not hydrocarbon wells. That may be salt water that comes out of a well from a helium well, say. It's not a hydrocarbon well that can be disposed of or injected underground in another well. A class 2 UIC is for hydrocarbon wells and disposal of liquids. Usually it's salt water. There's a class 3 injection, which the best example there is for I think it's in underground in situ leaching in copper mines. There's a class 4 UIC permit, a class 5, and a class 6. And I'm not that conversant with the regulations to know what they all are. We have some in the oil and gas rules, we have some reference to class 2. It's not very well written and it's vague, but there is some requirement by the commission to be involved in some way. We want to make sure that oil and gas rules dovetail with whatever primacy ADQ is going to get for its underground injection control program. The federal government, courtesy of EPA, offers what's called primacy to states that want it, where they can regulate their own underground injection control program, UIC. But the caveat is that EPA still oversees the whole program and makes sure that the state's doing it right. And I guess EPA has the authority to override a decision, but I'm not hearing that happens much. I don't think DEQ is particularly concerned about that.
Just as a
What
comment, the UIC primacy was not brought forth because of something the Oil and Gas Commission. It is actually coming under one of the categories in the in situ mining of copper. It is a newly developing technology, for at least for the state of Arizona, and acceptance. And that is, I believe, one of the reasons ADEQ is looking for primacy under it. So it isn't like, oh, we're going to do this for the oil and gas. It is because there's other programs over which ADEQ has jurisdiction. Dennis,
did I answer that, or is there any other questions? I'm not sure what y'all think.
Could you move the screen down a little bit so we can? There we go. Thank you.
Commissioners, is there any comment on what Dennis said about our participation? Any discussions? I think we should be involved and have some input in that. Is my personal thoughts on it. Anybody else?
Well, I agree that we need to do that. Yeah.
I agree with the chair. I think it should be the policy of the state of Arizona when it comes to water, that any way we can keep it captured and not basically have it evaporate into the air, that we need to explore those opportunities for future uses.
Moving on, review and consideration of future agenda items. Obviously, we've had a number of them here that we've already talked about and that we'll put on the agenda. I would like to add one too, that we have a vote for a vice chair at a future meeting, at our next meeting. Anybody else, things that should be on the agenda?
Well, I just want to mention that
Items.
I might be requesting that we change the date of the 21st of September to either the week before or the week after. I didn't know how to bring that up, so I put that on the agenda for future consideration. There's a meeting on the 29th of June. There's a meeting on the 6th of August or something like that. And then the next one is the 21st of September. So I'm asking for it to be either on the 14th of September or the 28th of September, whatever those Friday dates are. And I don't know if that requires a vote or, you know.
You would check with Rick, but I think basically what we would do is we would call a special meeting for the early meeting and then have an agenda item to cancel the regular meeting at that time.
or in the alternative, we could just set a future agenda item for a vote and discussion by the board. Certainly, there's enough meetings in between, so.
No, you're an optimist.
So, let's see if we can, there's two ways we can do this. My thought is let's put this on the agenda for next time with a vote for changing the date. If that doesn't occur, then we shall move and look into setting a special meeting to change it.
I would say just put it on the agenda for the next meeting to make a vote.
All right.
Does everybody agree with that?
Yes.
Next item, Blackstone exploration. Do I have any motions for this?
Actually, hold on. We have announcements, and we finished with announcements.
Oh, I thought, okay, sorry. What other announcements do we have, or announcements? Is there any announcements? Hearing no announcements, do have any, on Blackstone exploration, any motions to go into an executive session?
Yes, I move that we go into executive session.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Nobody's
Nobody's,
been of everybody because they've all left.
You got the
I'm
recorder
gonna
back?
close the door.
You can turn the recorder back on.
Yes.
Yeah. Dale, I think rather than do a motion, I think we should do a presentation,
Okay.
Okay.
a brief one, I would say.
Let me go back to the, where's our agenda? Let's see what the agenda says we can do. All right.
our agenda item, we're back in public session. We're discussing agenda item 9, Blackstone exploration. Blackstone exploration has asked for both temporary abandonment and shut-in status, and they do not qualify for shut-in status. Dennis, would you please explain for the record the difference between shut-in status and temporary abandonment?
Shut-in status is for wells that are producing something, a gas or oil. Temporary abandonment is for any other kind of well that's been drilled that they want to cease activity on. They want to just close it up for a period of time. It's a matter of semantics. The effect is the same on both wells. The operator cannot re-enter the well once they've either shut it in or temporarily abandoned it.
Is Rocking Chair Ranch 1, 2, 3, and 4 and State 4 producing anything?
No. None of those wells are producing anything.
Frank, if I can have just a minute, because I want to go right back to the rule, which is R 127101. Shut-in well means a well that is capable of production in paying quantities, is completed as a producing well, and is not presently being operated. A temporarily abandoned well means a well that is not capable of production in paying quantities and is not presently being operated. That is specifically what is set forth in rule. Now you may continue. I want to make sure that's part of the record.
Just a question, if on that distinction, would the board be required to make such a finding, or this discussion on the record would be sufficient, that we've made a determination as to the actual status of the well?
I think we could make an actual determination because we've received no information from Mr. Bonanno nor from Blackstone that he's produced anything out of that well.
Okay.
Then I would like to make a motion on Rocking Chair Ranch.
Frank, before you make that motion, make one more point.
Okay.
Dennis Turner, is the AZOGCC administrator, received an email from Mr. Bonanno on Wednesday, May 16th, once again, in some fashion, requesting 5-year shut-in applications for the wells, the Rocking Chair Ranch 1 through 4 and the Arizona State lands. Number 4. And the reason I bring that up is because we've had mixed email messages from Mr. Bonanno indicating he is requesting different steps on different wells. I want to establish that as of May 16th, he appears to be requesting a 5-year shut-in. Now he's requesting shut-in. I don't think that's the proper term, but he has been using shut-in and temporarily abandoned interchangeably through many of his emails.
Now, does that cover all the Rocking Chair Ranches as well as State number 4? And is that
All four
correspondence?
RCR ranch wells, he talks about all 4 RCR wells, doesn't talk about state land.
Okay. Then I would make a motion that we deny Mr. Bonanno shut-in status for Rocking Chair Ranches 1, 2, 3, and 4. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say yes. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Dale, did you say aye?
Yes, I said aye.
Okay. Any opposed? No opposed. The motion carries. I would make a motion that we grant.
Can we?
Oh, go ahead.
I would suggest a motion that determines, based upon the current information before this board, the current status of wells 1 through Rocking Chair Ranch wells 1 through 4, and number 5, as to whether currently there's sufficient information to consider them shut in, or whether there's sufficient information to consider them temporarily abandoned under the statute.
I think we just,
No, I would suggest a motion to describe it in that manner.
Let's see if I can do that.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that based on the information supplied to us from Rocky Chair Ranch wells 1, 2, 3, and 4, and state well number 4, the commission did not receive sufficient information to determine that the wells were capable of being productive. Therefore, we could not grant the shut-in status.
There we go.
That's
Clear?
that's clear. Second?
Second.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no.
Now move on. Thank you.
Motion carries. Now that we have determined the status, I would make a motion that Rocking Chair Ranch 1, 2, 3, and 4 be granted temporary abandonment.
Second.
Question on the motion and the second. What term and what would be the date beginning the temporary abandonment status?
It would be for 5 years.
From what date?
I would grant
August 12, 2016.
or just do it from today's date and without avoiding any controversy.
It's the chair and the second's prerogative on the motion.
I'm fine with today. Actually, I'd be fine with, I could go either way, so I'm fine with today if it makes, let's make it today.
Okay, then we'll make it today. I'll reword that motion.
Okay.
I would make a motion that we grant Rocking Chair Ranch 1, 2, 3, and 4 temporarily abandonment status as of today for a 5-year period.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, I want to make sure that we understand that that is under Rule R12-7-125, which defines temporarily abandoned.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. I
That
would,
still leaves the state 4.
correct. Do we? I'll do. Does anybody else want to make the motion on State 4?
Mr. Chair, I would move that we table any decision on state well number 4 to a temporary abandonment status until the results and interpretations of the cement bond log are submitted.
Second.
Discussion on that. Or, Mike, I have a question here. Do we want to just grant it contingent upon that study being given?
I would prefer to just grant it now. That information is probably irrelevant. Why delay it?
Rick, you're shaking your head no?
No, I disagree, because by the way the statute's written, and given my understanding in talking with Mr. Turner in regards to the other 4 wells, it would be my suggestion that you not grant him that status today, pending receipt, to ensure that we in fact receive the data as required under the rule.
Commissioner Cooper, would you restate that because of all the discussion?
My motion is to table any decision to place state well number 4 into a temporary abandonment status until the commission receives the results and interpretations of the cement bond log.
Second.
Okay.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. The motion carries.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make one other motion. I'd like to direct staff and legal counsel to send a letter to Mr. Bonanno explaining the decision of the board.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, do we have all in favor say aye?
Aye.
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 All opposed say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioner Cooper.
Anything else before we adjourn? Hearing nothing else, I move we are adjourned.
Second. You need it.
Is there a vote?
I make a motion, we adjourn, and he seconds.
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Gosh, Dale didn't wait, did he?
Yeah.
If Dennis wants to turn off his recorder.